47 minutes of work, 0 lines written. The file is open. The cursor is blinking at the top of a blank page. The clock has moved. The task has not. You weren't avoiding it. You were getting ready. That's the gap. The brief is open behind it. The notes are open beside it. 3 browser tabs are still sitting there. 1 reference is highlighted. The task list has been cleaned up. The file is still blank. Done. 0. That's the part that gets missed. Because, from the outside, something is happening. You read the brief again? You checked the reference again? You moved the task into today? You adjusted the list? You opened the document? You looked at the blank page? Then you went back to the brief. None of that looks like laziness. It looks like work. But the task itself has not changed state. There's still no first line. There's still no reply. There's still no filled field. There's still no saved draft with anything inside it. The activity count went up. The done count stayed at 0. And that is not a small difference. Starting a task and doing a task are not the same event. You can be willing to do the task and still not start it. You can understand the task and still not start it. You can have the time blocked, the file open, the notes ready, and the intention fully active. And the task can still be sitting at 0. That's the threshold, not the whole task. The first action, the line between "I'm about to begin" and "something has actually changed." Most people collapse those into one thing. They call the whole problem procrastination, but that misses the shape of it. This is not always a problem of not wanting to work. It is often a problem of never crossing into the first unit of work. The page is blank. That is not a metaphor. That is the evidence. There is a difference between preparing the conditions for output and producing output. The notes column can be full. The reference folder can be organized. The task list can be clean. The calendar can be blocked. The document can still be empty. Those are different states. Your brain may treat the preparation as progress. The task does not. The task only registers one thing. Did something happen inside the task itself? If not, it is still at 0. That is why this loop is so hard to notice while it is happening. You are not sitting there doing nothing. You are near the task. You are touching the material around the task. You are reducing uncertainty around the task. You are building a cleaner path toward the task, but you are not in the task yet. And the clock does not separate those for you. It counts all of it the same. 47 minutes pass. The calendar block was labeled for the task. The time was reserved. The file was open. But the block gets used by pre-start activity. The brief gets reread. The tabs get checked. The list gets reorganized. The window closes. The task is still blank. That cost is not coming later. It already happened. The hour you were going to use for the task became an hour around the task. And once that hour is gone, the next task behind it moves closer. The email waits. The form waits. The call waits. The second task now has less room because the first one used the room without moving. That is the first cost. Not failure, not shame, just arithmetic. Time passed. The task stayed at 0. The stack behind it got tighter. Now watch the loop without explaining it. The task is due today. The file opens. The cursor sits at the top. You read the first paragraph of the brief, then the second, then the first again. There's a sentence that could matter, so you open the reference. The reference has a note beside it. The note reminds you of another file. You open that file. Now the desktop has more context, so you move the task into a cleaner position on the list. That makes sense. You are trying to start properly. You return to the document. The cursor is still at the top. For a second, the hand moves toward the keyboard. Then it stops. One more pass through the brief, just to make sure the first line goes in the right direction. The clock moves. The document does not. This is the shape. The start moment approaches. Then, preparation takes over. Not distraction, preparation. That is why it feels defensible. The behavior is close enough to the task to feel legitimate, but it is still outside the state change. The task is not easier now than it was 40 minutes ago. It is heavier, because now it has the original start cost plus the weight of the failed start, and the trail around it is longer. More notes, more checking, more effort spent getting ready. Still nothing inside the task. Now change the surface. The email reply is open. The subject line is there. The body is empty. You read the original message again. You scroll to the part that matters. You already know what it asks. The reply stays blank. Same pattern, different object. Done, 0. Now change it again. The form is open. The supporting documents are gathered. The folder is sorted. The spreadsheet is visible. The fields are still empty. Preparation is real. The task output is not. Same pattern, different surface. This is the start gap. It is the space between intending to start and taking the first action. And the important part is that the gap is not empty. It can be full of real activity. It can be full of checking. It can be full of reading. It can be full of planning. It can be full of responsible-looking work. And the task can still be at 0. That is why I just need to get ready becomes so strong. It protects the delay without making it feel like delay. It says the start has not happened because the start would be premature. It says one more pass is careful, one more check is responsible, one more rearrangement is set up. Starting without full clarity feels careless, so the person stays in the only zone that feels safe, near the task, not inside it. The problem is not that the person is unwilling. The problem is that the first action has a cost. It changes the state. Before the first action, the task is still open, flexible, uncommitted. After the first action, there is something to react to. A line exists. A reply exists. A number is entered. A first decision has been made inside the task. That small move carries more weight than it looks like. So, the brain keeps choosing activity that lowers discomfort without crossing the threshold. Rereading lowers discomfort. Checking lowers discomfort. Planning lowers discomfort. Reorganizing lowers discomfort. Each one makes it feel like the start is getting closer, but none of them force the start to happen, so the gap stays open. And then it shows up again tomorrow. Same task, same line on the list, still unchecked. The brief is no longer new, the document is no longer new, the intention is no longer new, the state is the same. That matters. Because seeing the cost yesterday did not automatically fix the loop today. Awareness did not type the first line. The task shows up again, and the brain reaches for the same pre-start actions. Read it once, check the notes, look at the calendar, open the file, pause, go back to the notes. That loop has a reward inside it. Not a big reward, a small one, a short reduction in pressure. For a few seconds, checking feels better than starting. Planning feels cleaner than starting. Rereading feels safer than starting. And because that relief arrives immediately, the loop pays itself before the task pays anything. That is why it persists. The start never becomes unavoidable until the deadline starts doing the forcing. By then, the task has changed, not on paper. On paper, it is the same task, same file, same request, same form, same blank page, but the approach cost is different now. Day 1, the task was just unstarted. Day 5, the task is unstarted with 5 days of failed starts attached to it. Now you are not only starting the task, you are starting the task that you already failed to start several times. That is the second cost. The task itself may not have become harder, but approaching it has. The blank page now has history. The empty email now has history. The unchecked item now has history. Every failed start attempt adds friction to the next one. The zero state starts to accumulate weight, and because it has weight, the brain reaches for preparation even more. One more review, one more setup pass, one more way to make the start feel safer. The gap widens by trying to make the crossing easier. Now the shield gets stronger. At first, it was simple. I'm preparing. That sounds reasonable. But after hours of pre-start activity, the sentence changes. Now it becomes, all of this was necessary preparation. That is harder to give up, because the notes are real, the references are real, the reorganized list is real, the calendar block was real. You did work. You spent time. You engaged with the task. So it becomes difficult to say the clean sentence. The task is still at 0. Because that sentence reclassifies the last hour, or the last day, or the last 3 attempts. It says the activity was around the task, not inside it. That is uncomfortable. So the shield protects more than the current delay. It protects the time already spent. The longer the gap stays open, the more the person needs the preparation to count. And in one sense, it does count. It counts as preparation. It just does not count as starting. That distinction is the whole video. Because the usual fixes stay inside the same loop. Putting the task on the calendar does not start it. The calendar block can pass with the file still blank. Planning the approach does not start it. The plan can get cleaner while the task stays untouched. Reading the brief again does not start it. The brief can be understood while the first line still does not exist. Opening the file does not start it. The file can sit open for an hour. The only state change that matters is the one inside the task. 0 to something. Not finished. Not good. Not polished. Started. So the constraint has to match the problem. The problem is not a lack of a plan. It is not a lack of a slot. It is not a lack of more information. The problem is that the first action never becomes required. So make the first action required inside a small visible window. Open the task. Set a visible 5-minute timer. Start the timer. Before it ends, one task action has to happen. One line typed. 1 reply sentence drafted, 1 field filled, 1 number entered, 1 real move inside the task. Not more preparation, not another pass through the brief, not a cleaner list. 1 action inside the task before the timer hits 0. If the task is still at 0 when the timer ends, it did not count. The timer is not there to help you feel ready. It is there to close the threshold. It turns the start from an open-ended decision into a visible state change. 5 minutes running, task open, 1 action before 0. That is all it does. It does not promise the task gets finished. It does not make the work easy. It does not erase the time already spent around it. It only changes one thing. The task is no longer open at 0. It has started, and that is the exact state this loop was protecting. How much time is already logged around the task that has nothing typed in it?